Howdy. I sincerely hope that whoever, wherever, and whenever you may be, that this video finds you well. Today I just wanted to talk about some of the thoughts and ideas and experiences that I had growing up that made me, I guess, just initially start to question my reality and start to just explore spirituality in general. I know that is a lot of what this channel is going to be about. Like, I want to give, forms of practical advice just based on my own experience, but I also just really want to explore like spirituality and just deeper concepts. And one of the main things that I want to do is like share ideas with other people and hear other people's unique ideas. And I want to clarify by saying I'm not claiming any kind of like fact or set theory when I talk about these things. Like, really just view it as me talking about like my ideas, whether you want to view them as real or just fictional, like that's completely up to you. But I don't know, I've been wanting to share these things for a while just to see if anyone else maybe thinks about similar things, or just if anyone would find these ideas interesting. But initially, I guess it starts off with the way that I thought about things growing up. I always kind of felt that there was a lot more that meets the eye in reality, or that like there's just things that we don't necessarily see. I always, like, maybe not always, but from a very young age, I had thoughts and feelings that I didn't have any words for really, that just made me feel like there was potentially always stuff happening like around us and like in the same space as us even, that we just can't perceive, if that makes any sense. And this was before I had any kind of ideas of like spirit or other planes or higher dimensions or anything like that. So it was very confusing, to say the least, growing up and having these thoughts and feelings, because I genuinely just didn't have any way to express them until I was probably like 15 or 16 years old. But even then I struggled to express them because I felt like people just kind of didn't really jive at all with what I was saying, or just didn't really understand it. So I kept these thoughts to myself for a while. But initially, the idea that I feel like has developed for me as time has gone on is just the idea that there is constantly all forms of like matter, energy, and even like life and ecosystems and stuff that all exist in the same space as us, and that we literally just can't perceive. And a lot of it comes down to the idea of our evolution and our five senses, or some people consider us to have more senses, but just for the sake of it, I'll say there's five. I always wondered, especially when I initially started to learn about evolution, because I was raised like a creationist Christian, so I didn't start learning about evolution until I was probably like 14 or 15. But I always thought that what we can perceive in reality is very much limited to what's relevant to us, or just what allows us to survive, if that makes sense. Like, what we can see and perceive and do in reality all seems to be based off of, what keeps us physically alive, like our ability to, find food and to avoid danger and to know if like something is damaging our body or something like that, and to avoid those things, all that manner of things. And as I started to learn more and more about certain things in the world, that I'm going to give some examples here in a minute. As I started to learn more about things in like, initial spirituality and also science, it just made me start to think about these things even more and start to question my reality even more. But like, yeah, I always just felt that there could literally even be like a whole other planet, or just some form of like environment or ecosystem, or even like civilization or something that literally exists like right here and now, but that we just don't have the senses to perceive it, because like the type of matter and energy, or like frequency and vibration that they operate on, just isn't really relevant or perceptible to us in our physical experience of reality. And I mentioned I want to give some examples. Some of the things that I started to do research on when I was like a teenager, that made me start to think about these things more is, like, for one, the idea of radio waves. Like, there's right here and now, like in this very room, or probably in the room that, or wherever you're in, there's thousands of different radio waves that exist in this space and are passing through us. And those radio waves carry all different kinds of music and news and weather and like emergency broadcasts, all types of different things, and in different languages as well. But because we don't have the right equipment, like without a radio or a receiver of some sort, those radio waves effectively don't really exist to us. Like, they're completely irrelevant to us, but they're still completely there. Like, there's nothing that changes the fact that they're there, but to us, to our senses as they are, they're just irrelevant. So it's like thinking about it, like the radio waves don't exist on another plane or somewhere else really. They all exist right here and are all overlapping, but we just don't have the equipment right now to perceive them. And like another example is your phone is constantly communicating with all sorts of, like routers and satellites and all kinds of devices. And like I could stand or sit right next to you while you use your phone, and while your phone is like constantly having some form of back and forth communication or information exchange. But to me, like that information or that happening just doesn't really exist in my perception of reality, because I don't have the senses to perceive those signals. But those signals are still completely there, and they're very real, and they're not somewhere else, It's just that I don't have the tools in my perception to perceive those things. It's like my nervous system just isn't a part of the conversation that your phone is having all the time, if that makes sense. Another example would be that some animals can perceive like ultraviolet light patterns on like flowers, for example, that we just can't perceive at all. Like effectively, those flowers to us don't have that pattern. Like that doesn't exist in our reality or our perception of reality. But to certain animals, that pattern is completely obvious and just a part of their existence. And it's like the flower, there's nothing at all that changes about the flower. It's only the observer that's different, if that makes any sense. Another example would be that there's all kinds of sounds happening that we can't really perceive, whether they're like too high a frequency or too low a frequency for our ears to pick up. And it makes me think of like bats, they have echolocation, but they also communicate with very high frequencies that most of the time we couldn't even pick up. Or like whales, a lot of the time communicate with very low frequencies that we can't really pick up. So to them, it's like it's not happening at all, but for them it's like a huge part of their whole way of life and their whole way of navigating the world and communicating. And so that's another example of observers or having different tools to perceive different facets of reality. It's almost like silence or like a lack of sound doesn't necessarily mean like an absence of sound or an absence of something happening. It probably just means a limitation in your perception of the sounds that are currently happening right now, because there are probably always all kinds of sounds happening. And so after those examples, the question that leads me down, and also just the question that I ask you, is like, if we know that there's so many numerous things in reality and like aspects of reality that we know are there, but like that we can't perceive without certain tools, I guess it begs the question, like, why do we assume that it stops there, or that like that is the boundary of reality, and that there's not, numerous other things that we not only can't see with our own senses, but that we literally just don't have the tools currently to perceive those things at all. And I mean, if you think about it, like, why would we as humans have the ability to just perceive all of reality, or like the truth of reality? Because like when it comes down to it, physically we evolved for survival, and like the things that we experience in our life, or the things that we have to take into account in our life, are simply just the things that are relevant to our survival, you know, like I mentioned earlier, like food and physical safety and avoiding like physical harm and stuff like that. So why would we evolve to be able to perceive the things that potentially exist all around us, but that just aren't really relevant to our survival or our physical reality as it is now? And it keeps having me go back to the thought that I just had repeatedly growing up of just like, what if literally there is a whole other like planet or just some kind of ecosystem or even like infinite varying kinds of ecosystems or life or entities of some sort that literally just exist right in this exact same physical space as you or me, and that we literally just don't have the perception to perceive them, because like it's like they have a completely different set of rules that they follow in reality, if that makes sense. And that, like, you know, our set of rules and the things that we're bound by, they aren't bound by at all, but they have their own things that they're bound by that just aren't relevant to us, you know? And these thoughts are just some of the things that initially led to me, like, wanting to explore spirituality and just the idea of reality itself, you know? And like I mentioned earlier, after I tried in vain to explain some things to some people, because a lot of it too was that I was too young and didn't really have the words to communicate things properly. And this led me down all kinds of paths, like exploring, you know, like Hermeticism and the all, or like Buddhism, or even like Tibetan ideas like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and just all manner of these spiritual ideas I began to explore just out of a curiosity from these thoughts that I had growing up. And having these thoughts before like actually reading spiritual books and really starting to research some of the more well-known spiritual concepts, it led me into it with just like a very different perspective than what I imagine most people have. And it's that the idea that there isn't some kind of like veil that, you know, other aspects or higher planes or entities or whatever of reality are hiding behind. I think it's more so literally that, you know, they do exist in the exact same space as us, and that our nervous system or our ability to perceive certain frequencies, or however you want to look at it, is just not really compatible or relevant with them right now, if that makes sense. And it also even initially gave me the idea that, you know, there isn't, like, it's not a matter of physical reality versus spiritual reality, or that there's like a difference between those two things. Because, like, I mean, what I essentially believe now on a pretty fundamental level is just that everything is the same energy or the same source or the same consciousness, and that we just experience in this experience of reality, we're just on a very limited bandwidth, if that makes sense. And also that all forms of variation in reality are effectively just varying frequencies or like forms of vibration within the same like stuff or unified field or source. And I also like to think that that's kind of what Nikola Tesla was talking about when he talked about the idea of understanding the universe through like energy, frequency, and vibration. But yeah, I guess I don't know if there's much more to this video. I just wanted to explore and explain some of those thoughts and share them with people just to see what people think, because I've always struggled to share them before, but now I feel like I'm just in a position where I can articulate things a little bit better. And I do want to say, like, I very much encourage you to share any kind of like beliefs or just ideas that you had, whether it was growing up or right now, just about reality or spirituality or just literally anything. Because like I want to make this channel be a safe space for openness and just exploring ideas, and I don't want anyone to have to feel like their ideas are like weird or outlandish. And like, you know, if you view them that way, then great, you know, like I love the weird and outlandish ideas, but I don't want anyone to feel shamed or outcast for having or sharing those ideas. So please, by all means, like if you have any thoughts on what I've been saying, or if you have any similar ideas or completely different ideas, I very much encourage you to share them in the comments, and I will read all of them. I really am interested in just all forms of spirituality, and also, like, you know, you could look at it as forms of science as well, especially in regards to like quantum mechanics and stuff. But in general, I feel like a concept that kind of ties all of spirituality together is just the idea that there's more than what meets the eye, and that there's more to just what this reality is as we perceive it now. So just literally any idea that fits into that, or just any idea at all, I encourage you to share. And believe me, I've only just scratched the surface of my ideas on reality and just the whole universe, and I definitely will be sharing a lot more in the future. But I think that's gonna be it for this video. If you made it this far, I do want to say thank you for the new subscribers, and thank you so much for just the kind comments. Like, it genuinely does make my day so much better, even just seeing like one comment, you know? So I very much appreciate it. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So stay light.